When Marvel Studios exec Victoria Alonso left the company early this week, it just seemed a little bit odd. A lot of times, if it's somewhat amicable, even if the person is being forced out, they do a press release. They say, thank you very much. We've accepted their resignation. They're moving on to bigger and better things. And Victoria Alonso, through her agent, would say, I've had a wonderful time at Disney, but I'm ready to move on. I've accomplished all I could there. And they just kind of go on their separate ways, even though, likely something went on behind the scenes, but they decided to do it in a very nice manner, at least for the public. But Victoria Alonso, in this case, just abruptly left the company, and it meant one of two things happened. One, she was fired, or two, she actually quit, which didn't seem like a likely course of action since it felt like Victoria Alonso was starting to see herself as maybe bigger than the MCU herself. In fact, the article I'm going to talk about here that's talking about the firing of Victoria Alonso says she's become a brand unto herself. And that's kind of how she saw herself when she looked in the mirror. And there was no way she was going to quit that cushy job where she got all that high press visibility being associated with the most lucrative franchise in entertainment history. So yes, she was fired. And this article from Variety is absolutely hilarious. They do everything in their power to not admit she actually did a bad job. And there was a reason that she was let go. I mean, they give some of the details in there, but they're always trying to spin it the entire time. They open up with this story. Look at this, 2 women, Alonso said of the female photographers hired for the Oscar Awards. Alonso insisted the pair put down their cameras and pose for a photo with her in front of a giant Oscar statue. As they all smiled, she told them, "We've worked so hard to get here, and we're not going anywhere." 8 days later, she was fired as Marvel's president of physical production, post-production, VFX, and animation. 3 individuals familiar with this matter told Variety themselves. So they're always trying to paint her as this great, wonderful person, even though it's quite apparent, 1, she wasn't very good at her job, and 2, she was likely abusing her position, like her power position within Marvel Studios, in some capacity. We don't have those details yet. And I just find the whole thing absolutely hilarious. You knew she was probably fired, but you also knew you were going to get details quickly because just of the way that it was announced. And Variety are just trying to spin this any way that they can to present Victoria Alonso as just this great person, branded to herself, this outspoken, vocal LGBT woman and all this stuff. And it's I don't know, there's some real stuff going on here as to why she was actually fired. And they really don't produce anybody to contradict any of these allegations or the facts that are being presented within the article itself. One guy said, she wasn't that bad. It probably wasn't as bad as that guy said, but he couldn't actually refute it. It's actually pretty funny. But the sources said the decision was made by a consortium, including human resources, Disney's legal department, and multiple executives, including Disney Entertainment co-chairman Alan Bergman, to whom all of Marvel Studios reports. Alonso's longtime boss and Marvel chief creative officer Kevin Feige felt mired in an impossible situation and ultimately did not intervene, one source added. Alonso was blindsided, another insider added. Yeah, I would say that she was blindsided considering a week before, she's like, we're never leaving here. And then, a week later, she's absolutely out the door. When you have HR involved and legal involved and really high up executives, she clearly abused her power in some way. It doesn't sound like there was some type of untoward relationship or something like that. I imagine with juicy details like that, that would have made it into the article. But it sounds like she was likely abusing her power, which is something that we have actually heard a little bit, in the past when it comes to her treatment of VFX artists. Apparently, she was considered a kingmaker, and a lot of people felt like she was very vindictive when it came to her dealings with people while she was supervising the VFX associated with Marvel Studios. You don't get HR and legal involved unless something very bad went down, and Disney probably has some pretty juicy stuff in there, and she was shown the door for good reason. And like I said, despite trying to defend her the entire time, Variety really can't refute that at all. In fact, they had to admit, one visual effects artist recently told Variety that the biggest issue for them was Marvel's inability to provide clear guidelines. Quote, "The show I was on really struggled because it was an established character whose powers they were reconceiving for the MCU. The artist said on the condition of anonymity. Most complaints, they said, came down to one refrain: Marvel doesn't figure shit out beforehand. And that is 100% an attack on the job performance of Victoria Alonso as the lead supervisor over all the VFX within the MCU itself. She didn't know what she wanted before they actually started doing the VFX. It sounds like somebody that maybe wasn't all that familiar with the comic books, or maybe in the past hadn't had a lot to do with the production of the movies themselves. Remember, she only started out as a scouting agent. She would go out there and scout locations for the movies, and then they would go and they would film there. And then all of a sudden she's in charge of VFX, but she has no history in VFX. She's not a VFX professional. Shockingly, she couldn't figure shit out beforehand before they actually started doing the VFX in post-production. And obviously that's after all of key principal photography is over. So when you're actually getting to the end of the line as far as the movie. And let's admit, the entire Phase 4 pretty much looked like shit. The VFX sucked across the line. And yes, I understand they were stretched as far as you could possibly stretch with the amount of movies and content they were putting out there. But there's a reason that they put her in charge of that, because they thought that she would be able to handle it. And it's obviously, it was too much for her. And not to mention the other passive complaint in what the person said there, where they were taking an established hero within Marvel Comics, moving them over to the MCU, and then reconceiving how their powers worked and everything like that. It might be important for the VFX people to understand how the powers work, especially if you're going to change it from the source material, the comic books themselves. And we know Victoria Alonso was an enormous proponent of throwing away those stupid, silly, funny books that Marvel Comics were doing in the past. Those were just all pamphlets for the patriarchy. It's time to make some real changes in here. And then she stumbled and fell on her face because she didn't know what she actually wanted and probably didn't even understand how to communicate it so it could be executed on the big screen. She was fired because she likely abused her positional authority within Marvel Studios and because she was completely incompetent. The drumbeat that something is rotten in the state of Marvel Studios only grew louder with the release of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, one of the dumbest names in movie history, a film that finished shooting over a year before it was due in theaters and still weathered repeated criticisms for generic visual effects that looked like CGI glop and were very flat and cruddy looking. Even more critical, the movie has grossed $463 million globally to date, the worst performance of an Ant-Man franchise film, and a figure that means it will struggle to break even in its theatrical window. And let's not forget, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is the beginning of Phase 5, right? Phase 4 is just filled with tribulations for Marvel Studios and the MCU, where they just dropped the ball across the board. Everything looked like crap. The stories weren't conceived well. They were trying to incorporate too many stupid heroes that no one cares about in all these projects, and everything fell flat, and they started seeing diminishing returns. Well, maybe when we get to Phase 5, we'll get this all figured out. We see things have been delayed. They're having to do more post-production, and it sounds like Victoria Alonso is the person that's going to fall on the sword for that. And it also sounds like it's probably well-earned on her part, because she got the studio in trouble with the way she was treating people as an executive for Marvel Studios. She couldn't get her head out of her ass when it came to the VFX and what they actually wanted, as they were reconceiving characters and their power sets, but forgetting to tell the VFX professionals what they actually wanted to see on the big screen. And then you started seeing diminishing box office returns. Why are we going to keep paying this lady's enormous salary when it's clear that she's proven she's incompetent, and she's proven she likely can't handle that much responsibility just as a professional or a person either way? So I think the writing was on the wall. Not surprised that we got some details as far as why she was let go and summarily fired from Disney and Marvel Studios. She did a bad job. She got them in trouble. And now you reap what you sow. She thought she was bigger than the brand. She didn't think she had to do a good job anymore. The visuals suck. The movies suck. The box office receipts are down. And guess what? Your ass got fired this week. My good friend Aaron Sparrow joined me just a couple of days ago as we talked about our reactions just to the initial information that she was gone. Obviously, this was before it was confirmed that she was fired. This is a really great conversation that goes beyond Victoria Alonso. If you haven't seen this video, definitely check it out right now.